It just says you may then get on the road to become a citizen, but you got to continue doing all those things. You got to learn English. And so if you do that, we can be tough, we can be smart, and we can be fair, and we can close forever the spigot that has this situation where Americans feel like they're losing jobs to people who don't have a right to be here, and we also forget about the situation where a valedictorian no longer has to say, I can't go to college and fulfill my dreams. We can do this, and I think we're going to do this because, quite honestly, everyone out in this country, the public is far ahead of the politicians. It's just this is a real good issue to bash on when it comes time to elections, and everyone campaigns on it. But we will solve it because the business community will help us solve it because they want it solved as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. I do have to challenge you on the first part of your issues. There has been an unwillingness by the Bush administration, the Clinton administration, the Carter administration, the Reagan administration, and the Obama administration to enforce the laws on the border. I was just seeing on the news that this week, in terms of people who have been, intercepted and arrested for immigration violation, that those who have not violated other laws in our states, they've not committed drug crimes or violent crimes, if you have a clean record, you're being released. So the first problem is that our existing laws have never been enforced. So it's hard for me to know whether or not our laws are broken at all if our current laws are not enforced. Now, they may be problematic. They could very well be problematic, but we just don't know. If we go back to the time of Ronald Reagan, how many people remember when we had amnesty? You remember that? 50% of the people in Los Angeles that were here, that were undocumented, took advantage of that, and I think it was actually not a bad thing. The problem is our borders were never secured and our immigration laws were never reformed. So my position is actually very, very simple. First, we have to secure our borders, period. Small increases don't do it. I appreciate that there's increases in personnel to cover the border, but it's not nearly enough to do the job. The first job of the government, according to our Constitution in the United States, is to provide for the common defense, and having a secure border is part of our common defense. In the news also this week, there was a pilot program regarding electronic surveillance, observations regarding the borders. That program has been reduced and cut. It was cost millions of dollars and it only covered 53 miles. It was totally ineffective. I think boots on the ground certainly is always going to be more effective. I know that in San Diego, where they did in fact put up a wall, cross-the-border crime on the San Diego side has been reduced dramatically, because a lot of the things that are creating fear in our society isn't really immigrants that are coming here, it's the drug trafficking and the tragedy of human trafficking where people are left to die in the desert, and it's just awful. And we need to deal with that. So my position is really very, very simple. First, we secure our borders. Second, we look at having a much, much better and easier way for people to be able to come in this country if they're seeking opportunity and seeking work. I absolutely understand it, because if you go across the border into northern Mexico, the average income is often less than $2,000 a year. Yes, I think if I was living there, I would be trying to break into this country and seek opportunity as well. It's absolutely understandable, and we need to have a viable way, because this country was built on our immigration, but it's unfair to the people who have come here the right way, the honest way, and have become American citizens, to have people just cross here illegally and unlimited say, oh, we get the benefits. However, the reality is absolutely, as you said, we have a huge problem. There are so many people that are already living here, we really just can't do anything, but we'll have to embrace them. We'll have to find a way to do it. And those who are here doing things that are irresponsible, they're not acting as part of productive parts of our community, yes, we need to get those out. But I don't think any of these kinds of problems can be dealt with until first the borders are secured. We come up with a rational way that's more easy for people to come in. I heard Glenn Beck the other day, and I know a lot of us are troubled by Glenn Beck. He says, we don't need one Ellis Island, we need 4 Ellis Islands. We need a way to welcome people that want to come here and embrace the American dream and become U.S. citizens. Many of you don't know that the people who come here and work, they send a lot of the money back home because they're here to help their families. The Mexican government takes 30% off the top when that money crosses the border. These people are abused not only by us and by our system, but by their own government, and we need to help. Thank you. Well, the final question of the day is, what steps would you do to improve the environment? The first thing I wouldn't do is cap and trade. For those of you who do not understand what cap and trade is, you're taking credits in terms of carbon production. So if we were to make an example and sort of look at it how it works, what there is, there's this, if you will, like a stock exchange. And they said, well, we happen to be human beings. We happen to expel carbon dioxide. So we're allowed to say, each one of you are allowed a certain amount of carbon dioxide. So you can breathe a certain amount, so many times a day. Now, you may be an athlete. You may be Kobe Bryant. And Kobe Bryant is a high-performance person who breathes much more often than we do because he's always exerting himself. So what he needs to do is find somebody who is not exerting themselves as much and pay them credits in order that he can put out more carbon dioxide. In the middle is this exchange that processes this information, and they collect money from that. Any guess who the people are that own the exchange?
Wall Street.
Well, we might say Al Gore. We might say many of the people that we're working with and associates with of Barack Obama back in Chicago, and many people that have currently been in and around the administration, including people that have left Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Now, does this reduce carbon emissions? It's only exchanging. The only thing that's actually happening is a transferring of money. There's money going from the person that chooses to breathe hard. Part of it is skimmed off by the people that's processing, and it's going to the people that are not breathing as hard. It's simply wealth redistribution. In the model that we're looking at in terms of industry, is people that have businesses that aren't producing any carbon at all that are offshore. So we're transferring money out of our economy to other places. What effect does that have on all of us? It raises the cost of living right here in the United States. Whether we're buying food at the grocery store because that's being brought to us by trucks and they're consuming diesel, they're consequently paying more of a carbon tax. It's totally ineffective. My position is absolutely simple. If we want to have a greener environment, if we want to have greater production of industry in our country, do it. Let's build. It is time that we get off our tails and invest in our own infrastructure and not punish people for not doing it how we think they should do it, but have the federal government loan money to industries that wish to build solar energy, build nuclear energy. I know some of you have trouble with it, but it's working in France. France has had tremendous successes with nuclear power plants. It's time that we invest in ourselves and invest in clean energy, which will in turn that we never had before. I don't know if you remember when John F. Kennedy said, we are going to put a man on the moon in 10 years. Why do we do these things? We don't do these things because they're easy. We do these things because they're hard. That decision created more wealth and more industry in the United States than any country in the world. I believe now that if we make that same kind of investment in ourselves, we too can have the benefits of that prosperity. Thank you.
Let me agree with Mr. Smith that we need to make investments to be able to move into alternative energies. I don't think in this country there are many voices now that would say that we should not be making aggressive investments in solar, wind, geothermal, those types of energies that are either non-polluting or far less polluting than the types of energies that we rely on today. The principal concern that we have with regard to energy is the fact that we are so dependent on energy we don't produce. And the reality is that in many respects, we're funding through our payments. Half of the oil that we get today comes from outside of the U.S. We're funding activities that may be against our own interests long term because we are so dependent, as the President says, President Bush said, we are so addicted to foreign oil. So I agree in part with what Steve has said, but what I didn't hear is how we're going to diminish our addiction on the most polluting sources of energy, like oil, that we have. And we need to move in a different direction. So it's not just making investments in clean energy, which we have to do, but it's diminishing our addiction to the worst polluting types of energy. Otherwise, we're going to continue to see oil be the dominant source of energy for us, and coal, because they're the most available and inexpensive. And so guess what? Industry's not going to pay the extra cost to build a solar plant, a wind generating plant, unless it becomes financially viable. And so we have to make investments. But the reality is, in Congress, Steve would be voting with Democrats, not with Republicans, based on what he just said. Because we have tried time and time again to increase